Captain Alara Voss stood on the bridge of the UHS Perseverance and watched the stars through the forward display. The ship was old. Not ancient, but old enough that the walls had scratches, the floors had boot marks, and the coffee machine on Deck 3 made a sound like a dying animal every time someone used it. She liked it that way. Old ships had character. Old ships had survived things. They were patrolling the far edge of human space, out near the Orion Spur where the stars grew thin and the darkness between them stretched wide. It was boring work. 3 weeks of scanning empty space, logging asteroid positions, and running maintenance drills. Her crew of 216 souls had settled into the comfortable rhythm of people who had nothing to worry about. That changed at exactly 14:07 ship time. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hara, the sensor officer, leaning forward in his chair, "I am picking up energy signatures behind the fourth moon of Kepler 9. Multiple contacts." Voss set down her coffee. "How many?" Hara was quiet for a moment. His fingers moved across his console. When he looked up, his face had gone pale. 42, Captain. 42 warships. They are using the moon's magnetic field to hide their emissions, but they just powered up their weapon systems and that gave them away." The bridge went silent. 42 warships was not a patrol. It was not an exploration fleet. It was an invasion force, and it was sitting right on the doorstep of human space. Voss did not panic. She had been in the Navy for 23 years. She had survived the Kepler incident, the Belt Rebellion, and a divorce that was somehow worse than both. She sat down in her command chair, crossed one leg over the other, and said, "Identify them." It took Hara less than a minute. Velkarath hegemony, mixed fleet composition, destroyers, cruisers, and one ship that is. "Captain, one of those ships is massive. It matches the profile of a Velkarath command dreadnought." The Velkarath hegemony. Voss knew the name. Everyone in human space knew the name. They were a coalition of 7 alien species that had spent the last 300 years conquering every civilization they touched. Over 400 star systems answered to them. They had never lost a war. They had never even come close to losing a war. The galactic community spoke about them the way small animals spoke about wolves, quietly and with great respect. And now 42 of their warships were hiding behind a moon, less than 2 days from the nearest human colony. "They are hailing us," said Communications Officer Reeves. "Put them through," Voss said. The main display flickered and a face appeared. It was not a human face. The creature had gray skin pulled tight over sharp bones, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and a mouth that seemed designed more for tearing than talking. He wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than built, and behind him, Voss could see the massive bridge of the dreadnought, dozens of alien officers at their stations, watching. "I am Supreme Warlord Tyvan Rock of the Velkarath hegemony," the alien said. His voice was deep and carried the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. "You have entered space that now belongs to the hegemony. Your vessel will power down its engines and submit to boarding. Your species will accept vassal status under hegemony law. This is not a request." Voss looked at him for a long moment. She tilted her head slightly, the way a person might when they heard something strange. Then she said, "No." Tyvan Rock blinked all 4 of his eyes, not in sequence but all at once, which meant he was confused. In 300 years of conquest, civilizations had begged. They had pleaded. They had tried to bargain. Some had tried to fight. But none of them, not a single one, had simply said no with the calm tone of someone declining a second cup of tea. "You are one ship," Rock said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "I have 42. Your vessel is small. It is old. I can see the wear on your hull from here. You have no support, no fleet, and no chance of survival. I will ask once more. Surrender." Voss leaned back in her chair. She looked at Reeves. "Send the package." Reeves nodded and pressed a single button. A coded transmission burst out from the Perseverance at faster-than-light speeds, aimed at a relay station deep in human space. The message was short. It contained a protocol name, a grid reference, and a number. That was all. On the Velkorath flagship, a signals officer intercepted the burst. He tried to decode it. He failed. He reported to Rock that the human ship had sent a message, but that its contents were unknown. Rock did not care. One message from one small ship meant nothing to him. He had conquered species with fleets 10 times the size of this single vessel. He had burned worlds. He had shattered civilizations so completely that their names were forgotten. One human and her tired old ship were not even worth his full attention. "Your message will not save you," Rock said. "Nothing is coming for you. You are alone." Voss smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a person makes when they know something that the other person does not. "You are right," she said. "Right now I am alone. I want you to remember that you had this chance." "Chance?" Rock said. "What chance?" "The chance to leave," Voss said, and then she cut the communication. Rock stared at the blank screen for 3 full seconds. Then he turned to his weapons officer and gave the order that would change the history of the galaxy. "Destroy them." 42 Velkorath warships opened fire on the UHS Perseverance. The void lit up with energy beams, plasma bolts, and kinetic rounds. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon. It was enough to reduce any known alien vessel to dust in seconds. The Perseverance shook. Alarms rang out across every deck. The lights flickered. A coffee mug slid off a console and shattered on the floor. But the ship did not break. It did not crack. It did not die. Captain Voss gripped her armrest, steadied herself, and looked at the damage report on her screen. Hull integrity was at 89%. Armor layers 1 and 2 had absorbed the barrage. The ship's AI damage control system, called MEND, was already sealing microfractures and rerouting power around damaged conduits. She opened the ship-wide channel. Her voice was steady. "All hands, this is the captain, battle stations. We have work to do." On the Velkorath flagship, the sensors officer reported the results of the first volley. Tyven Rock read the data. Then he read it again. The human ship was still there. It was damaged, yes, but it was still there, still moving, and impossibly, it was turning toward them. For the first time in a very long time, Tyven Rock felt something cold settle in his stomach. He did not yet know what it was. He would learn soon enough. It was fear. The second volley hit the Perseverance harder than the first. The Velkorath adjusted their aim, concentrating fire on the ship's midsection where the armor looked thinnest. The hull screamed. Metal bent. On Deck 4, a bulkhead cracked open and the air began rushing out into the void, but before anyone could even shout a warning, the crack sealed itself. A thick gray foam expanded from hidden nozzles along the wall, hardened in 2 seconds, and formed an airtight bond stronger than the original metal. That was MEND. The ship's automated damage control system had been designed by engineers who assumed, correctly, that anything humans built would eventually get shot at. MEND watched every inch of the hull through thousands of tiny sensors. When something broke, MEND fixed it. When something was about to break, MEND reinforced it first. The system did not sleep. It did not panic. It just worked, faster and more reliably than any repair crew ever could. On the bridge, Captain Voss watched the damage report scroll across her screen and felt something close to pride. The Perseverance was not a pretty ship. No human warship was. While other species in the galaxy built their vessels with smooth curves and elegant lines, humans built theirs like armored boxes, triple-layered hull plating, honeycomb internal structure that stopped damage from spreading, backup systems for the backup systems. Every critical function on a human warship existed in at least 3 separate locations, so that even if you destroyed 2 of them, the third would keep working. Other species looked at human ships and saw ugly, graceless machines. They were not wrong, but those ugly machines could take punishment that would tear any other vessel apart, and they could keep fighting while they did it. "Helm," Voss said calmly, "take us into the debris field around the moon. Use the rocks for cover." The helmsman, a young woman named Tors, grinned despite the chaos around her. "Yes, Captain." The Perseverance dove toward the shattered ring of rocks and ice that circled the fourth moon. It was not a graceful dive. The ship moved like a wounded bear, heavy, determined, and angry. But it moved fast enough to make the Velkorath gunners curse as their targeting systems struggled to track it through the tumbling asteroids. On the flagship, Tyvan Rock watched the human ship disappear into the debris field and felt his jaw tighten. This was not how Prey behaved. Prey ran. Prey surrendered. Prey did not charge toward a debris field and use it like a soldier uses a trench. He had fought dozens of species, and every single one of them had done one of two things when faced with overwhelming force. They either begged or they died. This human captain was doing neither. "Follow them in," Rock ordered. "All ships pursue." His tactical officer hesitated. "Warlord, the debris field is dense. Our larger ships will have difficulty maneuvering, and our formation will." "I gave an order," Rock said. His voice left no room for discussion. 42 warships followed the Perseverance into the debris field. It was a mistake. The rocks changed everything. In open space, the Velkorath fleet could spread out, surround a target, and crush it from every direction. In the debris field, they were forced into narrow channels between spinning asteroids. Their formation broke apart. Ships that were used to fighting side by side found themselves separated by walls of rock and ice. Communication became difficult as the mineral-rich asteroids interfered with their signals. And in the middle of all that confusion, the Perseverance hunted. Voss did not try to destroy the enemy ships. She could not. One destroyer against 42 warships was a math problem with only one answer, and she was not interested in that answer. Instead, she did something that confused the Velkorath far more than any direct attack would have. She picked her targets with care. "Weapons," she said, "target the engine section of the cruiser at bearing 047. Precision shot. I want their main drive disabled, not destroyed." The weapons officer fired. A single precise beam lanced out and struck the Velkorath cruiser exactly where Voss wanted it. The ship's main engine flickered and died. The cruiser was not destroyed. It was not even badly damaged. But it could no longer move under its own power, and more importantly, it could no longer jump to faster-than-light speed. "Next target," Voss said. "The destroyer at bearing 113, same thing, engines only." Shot after shot, the Perseverance weaved through the debris field and crippled enemy ships with surgical precision. Not killing. Not destroying, just removing their ability to run. The Velkorath could not understand it. Why would a ship that was outgunned and alone choose to wound instead of kill? What possible strategy could there be in leaving your enemies alive but unable to flee? Deep in the flagship's analysis section, a young science officer named Setha Vey was asking herself the same question. She was not a warrior. She was a researcher, assigned to the fleet to study any new species they encountered. She had spent years studying the tactics of conquered civilizations, and she had never seen anything like this. She pulled up the tactical display and began mapping the Perseverance's movements. She tracked every shot the human ship had fired, every turn it had made, every target it had chosen. She ran the data through her modeling software and waited for the results. When the results came back, she felt her blood go cold. The human ship was not fighting randomly. It was not even fighting defensively. It was hurting them. Every shot, every maneuver, every seemingly desperate dodge through the asteroids had served a single purpose. The Perseverance was slowly, carefully pushing the Velkorath fleet into a tighter and tighter formation while systematically cutting off every possible escape route. The engines it had destroyed were not random targets. They were the engines of ships positioned at the edges of the fleet, the ones most likely to break away and flee. The human captain was building a cage, and the Velkorath were walking into it willingly, because they were too focused on the kill to see the trap. Setha rushed to the command deck. She pushed past officers twice her size and stood before Tyvan Rock with her data pad clutched in her hands. "Warlord," she said, "we must withdraw now." Rock looked down at her with all four eyes. "Explain." "The human ship is not trying to survive. It is trying to hold us here. Every action it has taken in the last 20 minutes has been designed to keep us in this debris field and prevent us from leaving. It is a trap." Rock stared at her, then he laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed across the bridge. A trap, set by one ship, one small, old, damaged ship, against the finest fleet in the hegemony. "Warlord, the data is clear. If we do not leave now—" "Go back to your station, analyst," Rock said. "Leave the fighting to those who understand it." Setha Vey returned to her station. She sat down. She looked at her data one more time, hoping she was wrong. She was not wrong. She began recording everything. Every sensor reading, every tactical display, every communication. She did not know exactly what was coming, but she knew with absolute certainty that whatever it was, the galaxy needed to see it. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Voss checked the time. 31 minutes since she had sent the coded burst. She looked at the tactical display. The Velkarath fleet was exactly where she wanted it, bunched together, confused, missing their edge runners and trapped in a debris field that blocked their sensors. Her first officer, Commander Alexei Petrov, leaned close and spoke quietly. "How long?" Voss checked the time again. 7 minutes, maybe less. Petrov nodded. He looked at the damage reports. The Perseverance had taken heavy hits. Decks 2 and 5 had partial decompression. The port weapons array was running at 60%. 17 crew members were in medical with injuries. The ship was hurting. But it was still flying, still fighting, still doing what it had been built to do. "Think they have any idea what is about to happen?" Petrov asked. Voss watched the Velkarath ships on her display. Still firing, still chasing, still completely convinced they were winning. "No," she said, "they do not." 38 minutes had passed since the first shot was fired. The Perseverance was bleeding. Not dying, but bleeding. Hull integrity had dropped to 61%. Mend was still working, still patching, still sealing, but there was only so much a damage control system could do when 42 warships kept adding new holes faster than the old ones could be fixed. On Deck 7, a plasma conduit had ruptured and filled an entire corridor with superheated gas. On Deck 3, the beloved coffee machine had finally been destroyed by a hull vibration, and Petty Officer Chen was genuinely more upset about that than about the enemy fleet. On the bridge, a support beam had cracked loose from the ceiling and was hanging at an angle that everyone pretended not to notice because there were more important things to worry about. Captain Voss sat in her chair with a cut above her left eye that she had not bothered to treat. Blood ran down the side of her face in a thin line. She did not wipe it away. Her attention was on the clock. 38 minutes. The burst she had sent traveled at faster-than-light speeds. The relay station was 4 minutes away at that speed. From the relay to the nearest human strike group was another 12 minutes. Spin-up time for an emergency FTL jump was 8 to 10 minutes. Travel time to her position was roughly 14 minutes. That put arrival at somewhere between 38 and 40 minutes from her original transmission. "Any moment now." "Captain," Hara said from the sensor station, 4 more enemy ships are closing on our position from the starboard side. They are trying to box us in against that large asteroid at bearing 270. "Let them think they are succeeding," Voss said. "Helm drift toward the asteroid, slowly, make it look like we are running out of options." Tors adjusted their course. The Perseverance limped toward the massive rock, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from 3 small breaches that Mend had marked as low priority. The ship looked like it was in its final moments. That was the point. On the Velkarath flagship, Tyvan Rock allowed himself a thin smile. The human ship was cornered. It had fought well, he admitted privately, better than any single vessel he had ever engaged, but courage without numbers was just a slower form of death. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships close to killing range. I want that vessel broken open. Prepare boarding parties. I want the captain alive. I wish to understand why she chose to die for nothing. His ships moved in. The ring around the Perseverance tightened. 20 ships, then 30, then all 42, converging on a single point in space where one battered human destroyer drifted against a spinning asteroid. And then space broke open. There was no warning, no gradual buildup. One moment the void behind the Velkarath fleet was empty, and the next moment it was full. 14 points of light tore through the fabric of normal space simultaneously, each one a faster-than-light exit point, each one perfectly positioned to form a ring around the Velkarath formation. 14 human warships materialized in the darkness. They came out of FTL already at battle speed, already with weapons hot, already in formation. There was no confusion, no delay, no moment of orientation. They had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times. They had been designed for exactly this moment. At the center of the new arrivals sat a ship that made the Perseverance look like a toy. The UHS Leviathan was a dreadnought, the largest class of warship that humanity built. It was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was a slab of armored metal 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapon systems, covered in sensor arrays, and radiating enough power to light a small city. If the Perseverance was a wolf, the Leviathan was the thing that wolves were afraid of. On the Velkarath flagship, every alarm went off at once. Officers shouted over each other. Sensor displays turned red. Tactical projections recalculated and returned answers that no one wanted to read. Setha Vey, in her analysis station, watched the new contacts appear on her screen and felt a strange calm settle over her. She had been right. She had warned them. They had not listened. Tyvan Rock stood frozen on his command deck, staring at the display. 14 warships, an entire human strike group. They had appeared from nowhere in perfect position at the exact moment his fleet was bunched together and unable to maneuver. "That is impossible," he whispered. "They could not have responded this quickly. No fleet mobilizes this fast." But even as he said it, a terrible understanding began to dawn on him. The humans had not mobilized in response to anything. They had been there already, waiting, pre-positioned within jump range of their patrol routes, sitting in the dark with their engines cold and their weapons ready, just in case. The human captain had not called for help. She had triggered a trap that was already set, like a hunter pulling a wire that had been laid across a trail days before. The Leviathan hailed the Velkarath fleet. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a human male in his 60s with gray hair, calm eyes, and the posture of a man who had done this before and expected to do it again. "This is Admiral Cale Morrow of the United Human Systems Navy," he said. His voice was polite, almost gentle, like a teacher addressing a classroom. "You have fired upon one of our ships. I am required by the laws of my government to offer you 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender. I sincerely recommend that you take those 60 seconds. Rock stared at the screen. His pride screamed at him to fight. He still had 42 ships. The humans had only 15, counting the damaged destroyer. The numbers were in his favor. But the numbers were a lie, and somewhere deep inside he knew it. "All ships," Rock commanded, "break formation. Emergency FTL jump. Get us out of this system." The order went out. Ships across the Velkarath fleet spun up their faster-than-light drives. Engineers worked frantically to calculate jump coordinates. Escape was the only thought in every alien mind. But the drives did not engage. Ship after ship reported the same thing. Their FTL engines were damaged. Not destroyed, but carefully, precisely damaged in ways that prevented them from making the jump to light speed. The shots that the Perseverance had fired over the past 38 minutes, the ones that had seemed random, the ones that had targeted engines on ships at the edges of the formation. Those shots had been calculated to take away this exact option. The human captain had spent the entire battle not trying to survive. She had spent it making sure the Vel'Korath could not run. 12 of the 42 ships managed to jump. They vanished into FTL and fled. The remaining 30 were stuck, surrounded, and facing a human strike group that had already locked weapons. The 60 seconds expired. Admiral Morrow spoke one more time. "I am sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. The human fleet opened fire. The battle lasted 11 minutes. It was not a fight. It was a demonstration. The human ships moved as one, their tactical AI systems linked together in a network that shared targeting data, threat assessments, and firing solutions in real time. When one ship fired, every other ship in the fleet knew where that shot would land and adjusted its own aim to cover the gaps. There were no wasted shots. There was no confusion. There was no mercy in those 11 minutes, only precision. The Vel'Korath fought back. They were warriors, and they did not know how to do anything else. But their formation was broken, their fleet was scattered among the asteroids, and their enemy moved with a coordination that bordered on unnatural. When it was over, 22 Vel'Korath ships were destroyed. 8 more were disabled and drifting. The flagship was crippled, its weapons dead, its engines silent, its hull torn open in 6 places. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Voss watched the last enemy ship go dark. She let out a long, slow breath. Her hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against her armrests until they stopped. Petrov stood beside her. He looked at the tactical display where the Vel'Korath fleet had once been and said nothing for a long time. Finally, Voss opened a channel to the Leviathan. "Admiral Morrow, this is Voss. Thank you for the assist." Morrow's voice came back, warm and tired. "You did the hard part, Captain. We just showed up for the ending." Voss almost laughed. Almost. Then she looked at the casualty reports from her own ship and the laughter died. 11 wounded, 2 dead. Ensign Kowalski from engineering and Petty Officer Yamada from weapons, both gone. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them and got back to work. There was still a lot to do. The Vel'Korath had a word for what happened after a battle. It translated roughly as the claiming. In their culture, the victor boarded the defeated ships, executed the officers, enslaved the crew, and stripped the vessels for parts. It had been this way for 300 years. It was the only way they knew. So when the human Marines boarded the crippled flagship, every Vel'Korath on board prepared to die. They did not die. The first Marine through the breach was a tall woman named Sergeant Akafer. She came through with her weapon raised, swept the corridor, and found a Vel'Korath soldier lying on the floor with a piece of metal through his leg. He looked up at her with 3 of his 4 eyes, the 4th swollen shut from an impact. He waited for the killing shot. Akafer lowered her weapon, knelt beside him, and pulled a medical kit from her belt. She examined the wound, applied a tourniquet designed for non-human limb structures, and injected him with a broad-spectrum painkiller that worked on most carbon-based species. Then she called for a medic and moved on. The Vel'Korath soldier lay there, alive and confused, staring at the ceiling. He could not understand what had just happened. This scene repeated itself across the entire flagship. Human Marines moved through the ship room by room, corridor by corridor. They secured weapons, they took prisoners, and they treated the wounded, every single one of them, regardless of species, regardless of rank, regardless of the fact that these same aliens had been trying to kill them less than an hour ago. The Vel'Korath did not know how to respond to this. Some tried to fight. They were subdued quickly and without unnecessary violence. Some tried to surrender formally, offering their necks in the traditional gesture of submission. The humans told them to put their hands behind their heads instead, which was far less dramatic but apparently sufficient. Tyvan Rock was found on the command deck, standing alone among the wreckage of his bridge. Most of his officers were dead or wounded. The great tactical displays were dark. The air smelled of burnt metal and something chemical that stung the eyes. He stood with his back straight and his hands at his sides, waiting. Captain Voss came for him personally. She stepped onto the bridge with 4 Marines behind her. The cut above her eye had been treated now. Covered with a small white bandage that looked almost silly against the blood and grime on her face, she walked up to Rock and looked at him. He was easily 2 feet taller than her. It did not seem to matter. "Supreme Warlord Tyvan Rock," she said, "you are being taken into custody under the laws of the United Human Systems. You will be treated fairly. You will not be harmed. Do you understand?" Rock stared down at her. "You should kill me," he said. "That is the right of the victor." "We do not do that," Voss said simply. "Then you are weak." "You are welcome to think so." Rock was escorted to a holding area that the Marines had set up in one of the flagship's cargo bays. It was not a prison cell. There were chairs, blankets, water and food, human rations, but also emergency nutrition packs that the ship's medical team had adjusted for Velkorath biology. Guards stood at the entrances, but they did not point their weapons at the prisoners. They just watched. Rock sat in silence and tried to understand. In 300 years of hegemony warfare, he had never seen a victor behave this way. It made no sense to him. If you were strong enough to destroy your enemy, you destroyed them. If you showed mercy, it was because you were weak or because you wanted something. But these humans seemed to want nothing except for the fighting to stop. It disturbed him more than any weapon ever had. Meanwhile, in a separate section of the ship, analyst Setha Vey had been taken into custody with the other non-combat personnel. She sat in a corner, still clutching her data pad, still recording. A human officer approached her and sat down nearby. He did not crowd her. He just sat at a comfortable distance and waited until she looked at him. "I am Lieutenant Dara Osai," he said. "I am the cultural liaison officer for the boarding team. Are you injured?" Setha studied him. He was young, with dark skin and kind eyes that seemed wrong on a soldier. "No," she said. "I am not injured." "Good. Can I get you anything? Water, something to eat?" "I would like to understand something," Setha said. Osai tilted his head. "Go ahead." "Why are you doing this? You won. Your fleet destroyed ours. By every law of war that the galaxy recognizes, you have the right to do whatever you want with us. Why are you giving us blankets?" Osai was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about how to answer. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Because giving you blankets is the right thing to do." "That is not a strategic answer." "No," he agreed, "it is not." Setha leaned forward. "Your captain, the woman on the small ship. She spent the entire battle preparing a trap. She let us chase her. She let us think we were winning. She crippled our engines so we could not escape. Every move she made was calculated to lead us to destruction. That is not the behavior of a kind species. That is the behavior of a predator." Osa did not argue. "You are not wrong." "Then how do you explain this?" Setha gestured at the cargo bay, at the blankets, at the medics treating wounded Velkorath soldiers. "How can the same species that built that trap also build this?" Oz looked at her for a long time. Then he said something that Setha would remember for the rest of her life. "We spent 10,000 years conquering each other," he said. "We burned our own cities. We enslaved our own people. We invented weapons so terrible that we had to create laws just to forbid ourselves from using them. We got very, very good at war, better than we ever wanted to be." He paused. "And then we got tired, not weak, tired. We looked at what we had done to ourselves and we decided that if we were going to carry this ability to destroy, we also had to carry the responsibility to stop. So we built rules. We built limits. We decided that power without mercy was just cruelty, and we had already had enough cruelty to last us forever." Setha processed this. "So you are not merciful because you are gentle. You are merciful because you know exactly what you are capable of and it frightens you." Osai smiled. It was a sad smile. Now you understand humans. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Admiral Morrow reviewed the after-action reports and made a decision. He called Voss. "Captain, I need to tell you something. Approximately 20 minutes into the engagement, before we arrived, we detected a Velkorath distress signal being transmitted from their flagship. It was a broad-spectrum burst aimed at hegemony space." Voss frowned. "You let it through." "I did. The hegemony will have received it by now. They will know what happened here. They will know their fleet was destroyed." "That is correct," Morrow said. "And they will have received the battle footage that was embedded in the signal. They will see everything. How their fleet attacked one of our ships, how that ship held them off alone, how our strike group arrived and ended the engagement in 11 minutes. Voss understood. "You want them to see it." "I want every species in the galaxy to see it," Morrow said. "We do not want to conquer anyone, Captain. We do not want an empire. We want every civilization out there to watch this footage and reach the same conclusion." "Which is?" "That attacking humanity is not worth the cost. Not today, not ever." This was the human doctrine. It had a formal name in military textbooks. It was called the doctrine of proportional terror. The idea was simple. Humans would not start wars. They would not invade. They would not conquer. But when attacked, they would respond with such overwhelming, precise, and devastating force that the attacker and everyone watching would never want to try it again. It was not about revenge. It was about making war so expensive, so painful, and so clearly hopeless that no rational species would choose it. The humans did not want to be feared. They wanted to be left alone, and they had decided that the fastest way to be left alone was to make one very public, very unforgettable example. The Velkorath hegemony had just become that example. In her corner of the cargo bay, Setha Vey finished recording. She looked at Lieutenant Osai, who was now helping a Velkorath medic treat a wounded officer. She opened a new file on her data pad and began to write. 6 months passed, and the galaxy changed. It did not change because of an invasion. It did not change because humans sent their fleets into Velkorath space to burn worlds and topple governments. They did not do any of those things. They sent the prisoners home. They returned the captured ships. They released Tyvan Rock with a formal diplomatic note that expressed regret for the loss of life and a firm suggestion that the hegemony reconsider its expansion plans. That was all, and it was enough. The battle footage reached Velkorath space within days. It spread through the hegemony like fire through dry grass. Every species within the coalition watched it. They watched 42 warships attack one human destroyer. They watched that destroyer refuse to die. They watched it fight and maneuver and hold the entire fleet in place like a single wolf holding a herd. Then they watched 14 human ships appear from nothing and end the battle in 11 minutes. But it was not the violence that changed things. The Velkorath had seen violence before. They were built on violence. What changed things was what came after. The footage showed human Marines treating wounded enemies. It showed blankets and medical care and food. It showed a species powerful enough to destroy an entire fleet choosing, deliberately and calmly, to show mercy instead. The subject species of the hegemony saw this, and something shifted inside them. For 300 years, they had been told that the Velkorath way was the only way. That strength meant domination, that power meant cruelty, and that mercy was weakness. Now they had seen a species stronger than their masters choose a different path, and it made them ask a question that the Velkorath had spent centuries making sure no one asked. What if there was another way? The first rebellion started on Torek Prime, a mining world controlled by the Velkorath for over 200 years. The Toreki were a small, sturdy species who had been used as labor for generations. They had never fought back before because there had never been any point. Fighting back meant death, and dying for nothing was not courage but waste. But now they had seen proof that the hegemony was not invincible. If one human ship could hold off an entire fleet, then maybe the hegemony was not as strong as it claimed. Maybe the walls were not as thick as they looked. The Toriki did not attack their overseers. They simply stopped working. Every mine, every factory, every processing plant on the planet went silent on the same morning, when the Velkarath demanded they return to work. The Toriki pointed to the battle footage that was now being shared on every communication channel on the planet and said a single word that translated, roughly, as no. It was the same word Captain Voss had used. The Toriki had learned it from her. Within weeks, similar movements spread across the hegemony. Species that had been obedient for centuries began asking for independence, for rights, for representation. Not all of them succeeded. Some were crushed. But the hegemony could not crush all of them, not without pulling ships and soldiers away from its borders, not without revealing how thin its power really was when it was stretched across 400 systems. The Velkarath hegemony did not fall in those 6 months, but it cracked, deeply and in ways that could not be repaired, and the cause was not a human invasion or a human weapon. It was a piece of video footage and the uncomfortable truth it carried, that there existed a species in the galaxy that was both stronger than the Velkarath and better than them. Meanwhile, humanity received an invitation. The Galactic Concord was the closest thing the galaxy had to a united government. It was not very united and it was not much of a government, but it was a place where species could talk instead of fight, and that made it valuable. For decades, humanity had been considered too young, too small, and too unimportant to be invited. That assessment was no longer accurate. The invitation arrived at the human capital on Earth through official diplomatic channels. It was polite, formal, and carefully worded. It said that the Galactic Concord recognized humanity as a spacefaring civilization of significance and extended an offer of membership. What it meant, in simpler terms, was that the galaxy had noticed them and was now very interested in being on their good side. Humanity accepted the invitation. They sent a small delegation. They were polite. They did not make demands. They did not throw their weight around. They sat in their assigned seats, listened to the debates, and voted on resolutions with the quiet confidence of people who did not need to prove anything. Other species watched them carefully. Some were afraid. Some were curious. A few sent quiet messages through back channels, asking about military alliances and mutual defense agreements. The humans listened to all of them and made no promises. It was SciFi who shaped the galaxy's understanding of what had happened more than anyone else. After her release, she returned to Velkarath space, resigned her military commission, and spent 3 months writing. The document she produced was titled The Doctrine of Wolves. It was part military analysis, part cultural study, and part warning. It ran to over 200 pages. Within a week of its publication on the Galactic Infonet, it became the most read document in recorded galactic history. Setha wrote about everything. She described the battle in technical detail, explaining how the Perseverance had used terrain, precision targeting, and psychological warfare to control a fleet 40 times its size. She described the human strike group's arrival and the coordinated destruction that followed. She wrote about Mend, about the absurd overengineering of human ships, about the way humans fought as a single connected mind through their tactical networks. But the sections that were read and quoted and discussed most were not about weapons or tactics. They were about the cargo bay, about the blankets, about a young lieutenant who sat down next to a frightened alien scientist and explained, with sadness in his eyes, why his species had chosen to be kind. Setha's central argument was simple, and it spread across the galaxy like a new law of nature. Do not mistake human kindness for weakness. They are kind because they can afford to be. They can afford to be because they are the single most dangerous species this galaxy has ever produced. They choose mercy not because they must, but because they remember what they were before they made that choice, and they do not wish to be that thing again. Captain Alara Voss was promoted to Commodore. She accepted the rank, attended the ceremony, and then requested assignment back to a ship. They gave her the Perseverance, which had been repaired and upgraded during the 6 months since the battle. She did not want a bigger ship. She did not want a desk. She wanted her ugly, scarred, stubborn destroyer and the crew that had kept it alive against impossible odds. Admiral Cale Morrow retired. He had served for 41 years and had grown very tired of watching things explode. He bought a small house on the coast of New Zealand and spent his days fishing and reading books about gardening. When reporters asked him for interviews, he politely declined. When military historians asked him about the battle, he told them to ask Voss. "She did the hard part," he always said. "I just showed up at the end." Lieutenant Dara Osai continued his work as a cultural liaison, eventually becoming the lead human ambassador to the 3 hegemony species that gained their independence in the years following the battle. He never forgot his conversation with Setha Vey. He kept a copy of the Doctrine of Wolves on his desk, open to the page where she quoted him, and sometimes he read his own words back to himself and wondered if they were true. He decided that they were mostly. Humans were not perfect. They were not always kind, but they were trying, and trying mattered. The Perseverance went back to its patrol route, back to the edge of human space, where the stars grew thin and the darkness stretched wide. The same boring work, the same empty space, the same maintenance drills and sensor sweeps and terrible coffee from the new machine on Deck 3, which somehow managed to be even worse than the one that had been destroyed. Voss stood on her bridge and watched the stars. Behind her, 214 souls went about their work. 2 chairs on the bridge had small metal plaques on them now, engraved with the names Kowalski and Yamada. Nobody sat in those chairs. Nobody needed to be told why. The Perseverance drifted on, alone in the dark. But it was not really alone. It was never really alone. Somewhere out there, hidden in the black between the stars, human strike groups sat in silence with their engines cold and their weapons ready, waiting for a signal that they hoped would never come. 3 months after the Perseverance returned to patrol, a new alien empire called the Rithek Mandate detected it on their long-range sensors. A young Rithek officer, eager and ambitious, reported the contact to his commander. He noted that it was a single human ship, apparently unsupported, operating near the edge of Rithek territory. He recommended interception and capture. The elder commander, a veteran of 60 years who had survived 3 wars and had no interest in starting a 4th, pulled up a document on his personal terminal. It was a copy of the Doctrine of Wolves. He turned the screen toward the young officer and pointed to a passage that Setha Vey had highlighted in her conclusion. The young officer read it, his eagerness faded, his ambition cooled. He sat down and said nothing. The passage read, "If you see 1 human ship, there are already 20 that you cannot see. They are watching, they are waiting, and they have already decided how the battle will end before you have decided to start it. Leave, now, while the choice is still yours." The Rithek fleet changed course and moved away. The Perseverance continued its patrol, unaware and unbothered, drifting through the silence between the stars. Just 1 small, old, ugly ship. And that was more than enough.